The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, or North Korea as it's often called, is the only country in the world where citizens can't legally leave for personal reasons or move freely within the country. It's also one of the few countries where both men and women are required to serve in the military. In the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea lost its biggest source of foreign aid, leading to a severe economic downturn. The country was hit by a massive famine, leaving countless people starving to death, an event the government officially named the Arduous March. After that, more and more North Koreans began to sneak across the border to escape to other countries, and these people became known as North Korean defectors. According to South Korea's Ministry of Unification, the number of defectors who successfully made it to South Korea peaked in 2009 at 2,914, but started to decline after 2012. This decline was due to tighter border controls imposed by Kim Jong-un and agreements between North Korea, Russia, and China to send defectors back if caught. In 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, North Korea closed all its borders, causing the number of defectors who successfully reached South Korea to plummet to under 100. But despite everything, the total number of successful North Korean defectors has reached tens of thousands over the years, not including those hiding illegally in China and Russia, which could push the number past 100,000. So how did these people manage to escape North Korea? And after leaving, where did they go and how are they living now? Today, we'll take a look at 6 daring escape routes out of North Korea and the challenges these defectors face.
보이고 싶어서 버린 것도 아니고 그리고 대다수 탈북자들이 지금 생계를 위해서.
According to data from South Korea, since they started tracking in 1998, nearly 34,000 North Koreans have defected to South Korea. Canada's 2016 census showed that 780 North Korean defectors have settled in Canada. Eurostat reported that 820 North Korean defectors became EU citizens between 2007 and 2016, with almost 90% of them living in Germany and the UK. In the past 20 years, the United States has recorded more than 200 North Korean defectors arriving in the country. The 2020 census by the Philippine Statistics Authority found that 406 North Koreans have permanent residency in the Philippines. Additionally, the international NGO Human Rights Watch estimates that around 10,000 to 30,000 North Korean defectors are living and hiding in China, mostly in Jilin and Liaoning provinces, near the North Korean border. However, this is just an estimate, and the exact number is unknown. From these statistics, it's clear that most North Korean defectors view South Korea as their final destination. This isn't just because they share the same language, it's also because the South Korean Constitution claims the entire Korean peninsula as part of its territory, which means South Korea automatically grants citizenship to North Koreans. In other words, the moment a defector sets foot in South Korea, they are recognized as South Korean citizens and are protected by the South Korean government. In 1997, the South Korean government even enacted the North Korean Defectors Protection and Settlement Support Act to provide camps for defectors, review and accept them according to certain procedures, and offer various allowances and assistance. However, even though Pyongyang and Seoul are only 200 kilometers apart, defectors often have to travel over 5,000 kilometers to escape. North Korea borders South Korea to the south, the Sea of Japan to the east, the Yellow Sea to the west, and Russia and China to the north. For defectors, the shortest route to South Korea would be to cross the 38th parallel, the military demarcation line between North and South Korea, but it's also the most dangerous. The Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, also known as the 38th parallel, lies between North and South Korea. Stretching about 250 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide, it's considered the most dangerous border in the world. This area is riddled with millions of landmines, trenches, bunkers, and power grids. On both sides, hundreds of thousands of soldiers stand ready to fire at the slightest sign of a change in the status quo. Even though the Korean War ceased in 1953, no peace treaty was ever signed, which means the two countries are technically still at war. Walking across the 38th parallel is incredibly perilous, and before 2020, although thousands of North Koreans defected every year, very few had ever dared to cross this deadly line. Yet despite the danger, some brave souls are still prepared to take on this challenge. In November 2017, gunfire suddenly erupted on the North Korean side of the Panmunjom area, a region that had been under tight security for decades. A North Korean soldier was driving a military jeep at high speed towards South Korea, attempting to cross the Joint Security Area, JSA, at Panmunjom. However, as he neared a border post, the vehicle accidentally plunged into a ditch, forcing him to abandon it and flee on foot. While he ran, other North Korean soldiers fired at him until he crossed into South Korean territory. Once he was safe, 3 South Korean soldiers crawled toward him, dragging him to safety. The soldier was shot 5 times, but fortunately, none of the bullets hit vital organs. After 2 major surgeries, he survived. When he regained consciousness, people learned that his name was Oh Chong-song, born into a military family in North Korea. He served as a driver in the police unit directly under the General Staff Department of the Korean People's Army, stationed at the Panmunjom Joint Security Area. According to Oh, his defection was not planned. On the day of his escape, he had secretly driven his friend to visit Panmunjom, thinking no one would notice. However, his friend, who was drunk, got into an altercation with the guards. Afraid of the consequences, Oh impulsively decided to flee to the south. There were rumors that Oh defected because he had committed murder in North Korea, but he later clarified in an interview that this was not true. He had merely clashed with a sentry. Oh now lives in South Korea and has not seen his parents or any other family members since. Now that we've covered the shortest yet most dangerous southern route, let's take a closer look at the eastern and western routes. Some might think that if the land route is blocked, they could simply take the water route south from the east or west. But what many don't know is that there is also a maritime boundary between North and South Korea, known as the Northern Limit Line. This boundary was unilaterally established by South Korea and the United States in the Western waters after the Korean War armistice. Initially, North Korea acknowledged it, but from the 1970s onwards, it began to deny this boundary. Numerous military conflicts have erupted near this boundary, and warships and coast guards patrol the surrounding waters year-round, making the sea route extremely risky. However, high risk doesn't necessarily mean there is no chance of success. On September 18, 2016, Lee Chol-eun, an employee of North Korea's Ministry of State Security, along with a friend, swam and drifted across the Yellow Sea for 8 hours, eventually reaching South Korea. The Ministry of State Security is North Korea's national security and intelligence agency, meaning that before defecting, Lee Chol-eun was an intelligence officer. In 2021, he was interviewed by the South Korean media outlet, Asian Boss. During the interview, he revealed that his primary job in North Korea was to control the ideology of the citizens. On one occasion, he even dismantled an underground church that secretly studied the Bible. In North Korea, the only deity allowed is the Kim family's 3 generations of leaders. Removing portraits of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un to hang a cross or preach the Bible is a serious crime. If discovered, the consequences range from labor camp imprisonment to execution. Lee Chol-eun came from a family with generations of service in the Ministry of State Security, making them wealthy and part of North Korea's elite. So why did he choose to defect? The story begins in 2007. That year, 21-year-old Lee Chol-eun had his first encounter with South Koreans. A South Korean Red Cross grain ship delivered rice to North Korea, and as the son of a high-ranking official, Lee had the opportunity to communicate with the South Korean crew. During their conversation, he was surprised to find that South Korea was nothing like what he had imagined. The people there were not starving, and rather than being a U.S. colony, South Korea was, at least in terms of sovereignty, an equal partner to the United States. After graduating from university, Lee was assigned to the Ministry of State Security in South Hwanghae Province near the north-south border, where he had direct access to South Korean TV programs. This exposure dramatically altered his worldview. The real catalyst for his defection was a speech by former South Korean President Park Geun-hye. On August 15, 2016, during a National Liberation Day speech, Park Geun-hye stated, "The people of North Korea can come to South Korea anytime. The new world is waiting for you." At that time, Lee had a strained relationship with his immediate superior, often clashing with him. After seeing Park Geun-hye's speech on TV, Lee finally made up his mind to defect. Working near the coastline, he discreetly observed the defense setups in various locations and identified what he believed to be the optimal escape route, swimming 6 kilometers to South Korea. He convinced a like-minded friend to join him. According to Lee, this friend was tall with long legs. When crossing the minefield, the friend led the way, using his long legs to probe for safe zones, while Lee followed closely behind. It might sound like the friend played the role of a mine detection dog, but what mattered was that they successfully navigated through the minefield. Next, they had to get past the electrified fence. Due to North Korea's chronic power shortages, many parts of the grid were underpowered and had gaps. Lee and his friend soon found a breach in the power grid, made their way to the shore, and then, under the cover of night, plunged into the sea. However, they soon discovered that the rubber tubes they had prepared to help them breathe were useless, and they had brought too much luggage, so they ended up discarding everything they could. After swimming for a while, they encountered a ship. Unsure if it was a North or South Korean ship, they swam desperately toward a nearby uninhabited island, which they later learned was called Hambakdo. By then, it was mid to late September, and the water was freezing. Soaked to the skin, they spent the night on the island, covering themselves with leaves and branches to keep warm, and barely managing to regain their strength. The next day, they built a makeshift raft with some sticks, and resumed their journey, eventually being discovered and rescued by a South Korean warship. Because Lee had previously worked for North Korea's intelligence agency, and still had his work ID with him when he arrived in South Korea, the South Korean authorities spent several months investigating his identity before finally allowing him to live freely in the country. Only after confirming that he was not a spy did they permit him to stay in South Korea. Compared to the southern route through Panmunjom and the East-West Sea route, more defectors opt for the northern route, crossing the China-North Korea border. North Korea shares its northern border with both China and Russia. The North Korea-Russia border is about 17 kilometers long, while the border with China stretches for 1,400 kilometers. This long border mainly follows the Yalu River, Paektu Mountain, and the Tumen River. The Yalu River, which is 795 kilometers long, makes up 56% of the China-North Korea border. The Tumen River, 521 kilometers in length, accounts for another 37%, with only the final 17 kilometers not serving as the border. The remaining 7% is the Paektu Mountain region, the only part of the China-North Korea border not defined by a river. Unlike the heavily fortified demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, the areas along the China-North Korea and Russia-North Korea borders are less guarded, due to North Korea's friendly relations with these neighboring countries. The Tumen River area, in particular, is notably accessible for defectors. During summer, the river is shallow enough to wade across, and in winter, it freezes over, making it possible to walk across. However, defectors face a significant challenge if they choose to cross into China or Russia. Both countries have border agreements with North Korea. If defectors are caught by Chinese or Russian authorities, they are immediately sent back to North Korea, which often leads to dire consequences. Therefore, it's unwise for defectors to remain in China or Russia for long. Most continue their journey to Mongolia or other Southeast Asian countries, and eventually reach South Korea. Among the Southeast Asian countries bordering China, Myanmar, and Laos also maintain good ties with North Korea, and will repatriate defectors if they are caught. This leaves Mongolia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia as the only viable transit countries for defectors. If defectors opt to cross the Russia-North Korea border and then make their way to Mongolia, they would be taking a long, arduous route, traveling counterclockwise around much of China's northern regions. Given the challenges, it's almost impossible to reach any Southeast Asian country directly from Russia. This is why crossing the China-North Korea border is the preferred option for most defectors. Within China, there are 4 main routes defectors take. The first route involves taking a train from Yanji to Harbin, then traveling to Yakeshi in Inner Mongolia, which is about 200 kilometers from the border. From there, they continue west by bus, and once they are about 20 kilometers from the China-Mongolia border, they start the final leg of their journey on foot. The second route starts with a train ride from Shenyang to Hohhot, followed by a transfer to Erenhot, where they cross the border into Mongolia. Both the first and second routes use Mongolia as a transit country. Crossing the China-Mongolia border comes with the risk of being caught by Chinese border patrols, and defectors may also get lost in the vast, barren landscapes. In such cases, they might find themselves lying under the starry sky, waiting for death. However, for those with limited financial resources, the Mongolian route is often the best option. The distance is shorter, and once in Mongolia, defectors are relatively safe. The Mongolian government takes a neutral stance on North Korean refugees, allowing them to choose a third country to travel to freely. With the increasing number of defectors, Mongolia has even set up refugee camps specifically for them. Being arrested in Mongolia often means securing a free ticket to Seoul, making Mongolia a significant transit hub for North Korean defectors. The third route is through Thailand. Defectors start by taking a train from Shenyang to Beijing, then transfer to a train heading to Kunming, and continue on to Yuxi. From Yuxi, they take a long-distance bus to Menglong town in Yunnan province. They then wait for the right moment to cross the China-Myanmar border, eventually entering Thailand through the Golden Triangle. Once in Thailand, defectors need only turn themselves in to the local police, and from there, the process becomes smoother. The Thai government has an unofficial agreement with South Korea, allowing defectors to be sent to South Korea under the premise that all residents of the Korean peninsula are considered South Korean citizens. The fourth route is through Vietnam. Defectors take a train from Shenyang to Beijing, then transfer to Nanning, and continue to Puer or Pingxiang before crossing into Vietnam. Some defectors seek refuge in the South Korean, Thai, Indonesian, or Danish consulates in Vietnam, while others continue on to Cambodia, heading for the South Korean embassy there. Despite Vietnam's closer political ties to North Korea, it cooperates with South Korea diplomatically, allowing South Korean investments to flow into the country. Before 2004, the Vietnam route was the preferred path for defectors seeking refuge in Southeast Asia. The largest shelters for North Korean defectors in Vietnam were all established by Korean expats. However, after a major incident in 2004, where 468 North Korean defectors were airlifted from Ho Chi Minh City to South Korea, North Korea protested by recalling its ambassador to Hanoi, Park Yong-sop. As a result, Vietnam had to expel the operators of the shelters and tighten border controls. Regardless of whether they take the northern, southern, or east-west routes, these routes are already very well known among defectors. In recent years, China's Skynet project has made it increasingly difficult for defectors to successfully escape through China. Although there are more covert routes available, we won't discuss them here for various reasons. For defectors taking the China route and then making their way to Mongolia or another Southeast Asian country before finally reaching South Korea, the journey spans thousands of kilometers. It's impossible to accomplish this alone, so defectors usually rely on intermediaries or human traffickers. To avoid drawing attention during their journey through China, traffickers often disguise defectors in fashionable clothes, bags, and makeup to make them blend in as South Korean tourists. On trains, defectors must stay quiet, hiding in restrooms or pretending to sleep if conductors come by to check IDs. Traffickers teach them to stay calm and continue onward even if their family member is caught, acting as if they don't know them. If captured, they are also told not to confess the names of their helpers. When crossing borders, defectors need to carry a compass and plenty of water. If traveling north to Mongolia in winter, they also need to bring warm clothing. According to an NBC report, hiring a trafficker cost around $2,000 in 2007. By 2015, however, Business Insider reported that the cost had risen to $8,000 per person, a sum that represents much of a North Korean's life savings. Tragically, even after paying these fees, some defectors never make it safely to South Korea. According to The Observer, in 2000, a North Korean defector who was 7 months pregnant boarded a smuggling boat to South Korea by the Yalu River. The organizers promised her that she would only need to sleep for a night and would arrive in Incheon by dawn. However, in the middle of the night, North Korean soldiers unexpectedly boarded the boat for an inspection, and all the defectors hiding under the deck were taken back to North Korea. Their fate remains unknown, and the money paid to the traffickers was lost. Some unscrupulous traffickers have even sold female defectors into forced labor, or the sex trade in remote areas. Their only solace comes from what local missionaries refer to as the Lord. Yet, even after enduring such hardships to escape North Korea and reach South Korea, can defectors truly live the life they dream of? In 2019, at a vegetable market on the outskirts of Seoul, 42-year-old Han Sung-ok carefully scrutinized vegetables at a stall, while her 6-year-old son played by a nearby fence. The stall owner was very annoyed by her behavior. Han was a regular at the market, and several vendors recognized her. They found her picky and frugal, often spending a long time selecting produce but buying very little. On that day, Han bought a head of lettuce for 500 won, about 40 cents, paid quietly, and left with her son. A few weeks later, both mother and son were found dead, believed to have starved to death. Han, a North Korean defector, had risked everything to escape famine in North Korea, in search of a better life in the South. Yet in Seoul, one of Asia's wealthiest cities, she and her son died of hunger. When their bodies were discovered, the only food in their home was a bag of chili powder. During their final days, the stall owner at the market was one of the last people Han had interactions with, and police later revealed that around that time, she had emptied her bank account, withdrawing the remaining 3,858 won, about $3.20. The stall owner later said that if Han had shared her struggles, she would have given her more food. A 2020 report from Korea Jungang Daily noted that in the past 8 years, 29 North Korean defectors had returned to North Korea. An article in China's elite reference newspaper explained that after Kim Jong-un came to power, he adopted a more conciliatory approach, making it a priority to encourage defectors to return. Unlike the brutal punishments of the past, He promised that returning defectors would not only be spared punishment, but could also receive rewards, with assurances that they would not be sent to labor camps. However, returning is not easy for defectors, as they become South Korean citizens upon arrival, and it is illegal for South Korean citizens to travel to North Korea without government approval. You might wonder why, after going through so much to escape, defectors would want to return to North Korea. This brings up the awkward situation faced by defectors in South Korea. Having lived their entire lives under North Korea's planned economy, defectors often find it challenging to adapt to the capitalist and market-oriented society in South Korea. The vastly different educational systems between the two Koreas leave defectors at a significant disadvantage when seeking employment in the South. Most male defectors end up doing manual labor, such as moving or security work, while many female defectors work as waitresses in restaurants. One defector, Kim Kwang-cheol, a pseudonym, arrived in South Korea in 2002. His first job was as a security guard at a nightclub, earning a decent salary of 2.5 million won per month, about $1,800. However, after a dispute with a coworker turned violent, he lost his job. When asked about the cause of the fight, Kim explained, "I always tried to hide my identity, but once people found out I was a defector, their attitude toward me changed immediately. It deeply hurt me when they constantly mocked North Korea." In South Korea, defectors are often seen as foreigners. Politicians may speak well of them, but in society, they still face discrimination. This harsh reality can lead defectors down illegal paths, such as drug dealing or prostitution, which only worsens public perception of them, creating a vicious cycle. In 2022, the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies at Seoul National University published a survey on the living conditions of North Korean defectors. They interviewed 312 defectors who arrived in South Korea between 2017 and 2019, and 18.59% of them expressed regret about coming to South Korea. The top 3 reasons for their regret were cultural differences, 84.48%, psychological isolation, 70.69%, and economic difficulties, 65.52%. Professor Ko from Dongguk University believes that the difficulties faced by defectors in South Korea cannot be solved by government support alone, as many issues stem from the vast differences between the social systems of the two Koreas. Most defectors find themselves at the bottom of South Korean society, deeply troubled by financial hardship, discrimination, and social isolation. Lee Chol-eun, the defector who swam to South Korea mentioned earlier, shared in an interview that the outside world was not as wonderful as he had imagined. In North Korea, he had been among the elite, but in South Korea, he was just another machine worker in a cosmetics factory. When he first arrived, Lee aspired to become a police officer and worked hard to prepare for the exam. However, he soon realized that it was nearly impossible for a defector to hold public office in South Korea, especially given his previous work with North Korea's Ministry of State Security. When asked about his impressions of South Korean society after living there for so long, Lee Chol-eun had much to say. He noted that while South Korea is indeed more developed than North Korea in many ways, he felt that South Koreans have an excessive sense of national pride. They believe that South Korea is the best in the world in every respect, and are resistant to alternative perspectives. He attributed this rigid mindset partly to the media's biased portrayal. For instance, North Korean soldiers are often depicted as emaciated and scrawny on South Korean TV, but Lee pointed out that many North Korean soldiers are actually quite strong. He argued that North Korea is not as impoverished and wretched as often portrayed. Some cities are economically developed, though South Korean media tend to focus on the least developed rural areas. In North Korea's big cities, students are starting to use the internet, and society is gradually progressing. Yet most South Koreans refuse to hear such things. Even when Lee mentioned a minor positive aspect of North Korea, people would snap back, "So why the hell are you in South Korea then?" Lee admitted he'd asked himself that very question countless times. At the end of the interview, the host asked Lee what he missed most about North Korea. He replied, "I'm a simple person. I miss the soybean paste soup my mom used to make. I miss my mom." Before defecting, Lee visited his father's grave one last time, but didn't say goodbye to his mother, fearing that seeing her would weaken his resolve to leave. People often discover that, after many twists and turns, the place where they long to go is where they used to be. Over the years, tens of thousands of North Korean defectors have left their homeland for various reasons and led vastly different lives. Regardless of their regrets or circumstances, in the sweeping current of history, each defector's fate is merely a speck of dust.